All right, thank you. So, as you know, and for the sake of this particular recording, for the Think Facilitator orientation, my name is Jazz, and I happen to be the founder and the president of the board of directors for 50 Shades of Purple Against Bullying. And we're also known as FSP Against Bullying. We were founded 6.5 years ago, well, actually longer than that, because in September of this year, 2022, we'll be 7 years young, magic number 7. And we've had a tremendous run, and we've been able to weather the 2020 pandemic, civil unrest, a lot of things, pivot to reimagine how we would do business remotely and continue to function as a viable organization, supporting individuals, that's youth as well as adults, who have been affected by bullying and abuse. I want to say I'm incredibly proud of this organization because we've done a tremendous job with very, very little resources. I also want to say that our number one resources is people just like you, Teresa. Those are our volunteers. We wouldn't function without them. And when I say things like we could never, ever, ever pay you for what you contribute to us, I mean that with all sincerity. Because the things that people do because they care are far more important than the things that they do because they're being compensated. You can walk away at any time. It's join at will, it's exit at will. And I'm proud to say we have a tremendous track record of people joining and they don't leave. I don't know why that is, but they don't. They find something, if not what they initially signed on for, but something within this organization that speaks to their spirit when that is important to them. So today we're going to do an overview of the Think Bullying Prevention Program educational facilitators, and I want to share a document with you. So the document you're looking at this time is how to facilitate a successful Think workshop. And while facilitating a workshop is by no means an easy feat, I'll be the first to say it's not easy. But an inexperienced facilitator can get great results just using these 15 steps. And trust me, I was one of those ones in the early incubator stage of thing that used these steps. And we've gone back and we looked at them just a couple of times, but they've been very, very successful for us. And when I was in corporate America, we used to use something called the 5P rule. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But the 5P rule is proper planning prevents poor performance. And that's what these steps are designed to do, is to help you facilitate a workshop. And it's much like taking like those 1 steps at a time so that you know what you're getting into. And you know how to set up and prepare yourself to be successful in the classroom or in an assembly with youth between the 1st and the 5th grade. One of the things that we do is we get to know the participants and what their concerns is at least 30 days prior to scheduling a workshop. So how do we do that? Just through our external in-house workshop. First, we get to know the learners as well as the educators that bring us in. Oftentimes, it's a principal or it's a school administrator that brings us in. They'll say, we've got a problem, and this is what our bullying problem is. There are incidents being reported in a particular class. And statistics would say that the 3rd and 4th grade is that sweet spot. That's not so sweet. It's where you find that those behaviors are starting to really elevate themselves and show themselves externally. It may go from like name calling to physical aggressions, etc. Not so much the cyberbullying yet. So one of the things that we do in our pre-survey is it's a little different because we have the youth to complete the survey as well. And it's a very simple survey, and it only asks a few questions such as, excuse me, how helpful are your teachers in your school when a child is being bullied? And how concerned are you with bullying in your school? And during the last week, how many times, if you or somebody else used a cell phone to say hurtful things? Now, you may say, well, at that grade, they're not really using cell phones, but that's absolutely not true. If you just look around, if you've been in the mall, you've been at a community event, you see everybody's got a cell phone. You even see toddlers walking around with cell phones and using devices to play games on. And one of the more vital questions we ask, believe it or not, is the primary language. Communication is key in everything we do. If the individual does not understand what we're communicating to them, all lines of communication breaks down. So I'll share a story with you. I remember one of the first schools that we had gone into, and we did our preliminary due diligence review with the school's demographics. We did the preliminary interview with the educators as well as the administrators. And one of the things we noticed about the demographic of this particular school is that more than a third of the students, English was a second language. So we're like, wow, then what's the primary language? It turned out that it was a school that was largely occupied by individuals where Spanish was the primary language. At that particular time, we didn't have anyone on our team that was going in as a facilitator that was bilingual. And if you know anything about the public school system, you're really not encouraged to teach any lesson plan in Spanish unless you're teaching Spanish. So we don't typically translate in Spanish for the students. However, it's nice to be able to greet and affirm a student in their local language, whether it's Spanish or French, etc. So we went into this particular school and most of the kids did pretty well. But again, the students that were primarily Spanish understanding, they had blank looks on their faces. And we didn't even notice it. I remember us being in an assembly. It must have been about 75 kids in this assembly. And we took a photograph with the school, as the school wanted to create a poster or a flyer with the students in the assembly along with us facilitating. And you could see the blank stares and the blank looks on the faces of quite a few of the students, and assuming that they were Spanish speaking. They had no idea why they were being gathered. They had no idea what this whole photo moment would be about, or what would their photos be used for. And I remember saying to myself, I never want that to happen again. I don't want to be before a group of people and they're staring blankly off into space because they don't have a clue about what they're doing and why. That's very, very important to us. So the preliminary interview that we do along with the survey is very, very important. So we know how to communicate and communicate effectively, not only with our administrators, but the students we work with. Any questions? Then we go into our adult survey. The adult survey gives the educators an opportunity to tell us what they need, what's been going on, what has been some of the challenges. And the challenges could be across the board. We spend about 30 minutes with them in a face-to-face meeting. And the reason we do this face-to-face versus an online survey, which is what we do with the youth, is because we read body language. There's a language that people will state to you without the spoken word. A teacher will let you know if there's a challenge going on in her classroom, if she's in the room with you without the words. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you come from an educational background. And
A little bit, yeah.
so I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where the school administrator or the principal is in the same room with you. There is a reluctance to speak up and really state and be transparent and vulnerable when you have your boss in the same room.
Hmm.
There can be some fears of backlash. So we want to avoid that. So through the face-to-face interaction in that 30 minutes, we're able to gauge a lot and measure a lot in terms of what the educator really needs, because we're actually there on their behalf, right? We're not going to be effective if the only person we've communicated with is the principal or the head administrator. Most times, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just a thing. The administrator really cares a lot about data. And we care a lot about people, just like our educators. They care a lot about the individual lives that they're affecting. And so when we remove the whole, boogeyman from the scenario, the data piece, and we break it down that these are individual lives that really will someday grow up to make decisions on our behalf, it's a game changer. It changes the dynamics of what we're doing and how we interact with people. So yes, when we're with the administrators, we will, of course, have conversation about the statistics, and that's what they want to hear. And these are real statistics and that we share with them. They're able to provide the data in terms of how many incident reports they get. So let's talk just a minute about the incident reports. Most incident reports are skewed. Again, I'll repeat that. Most incident reports as it relates to bullying is skewed. Now, is it skewed up or down? Are they reporting less bullying incidents than are actually occurring, or more? What would you say?
Less.
Absolutely. You have any idea why?
Yeah, people don't want to be associated with the bullying, like senses of shame.
Yes, absolutely. And even if the students are not reporting it, is there a reason why the educators are not reporting these incidents as potential problems?
Yeah, doesn't make them look good.
Absolutely. So the reward system in most school districts and most school systems is the less reports you have, the better your class looks, the better your school looks. So there's not really an incentive to report incidents. So who gets hurt?
The kids.
Absolutely. And who else? Because there's also, it's a domino effect.
And parents.
Absolutely. Parents, guardians, siblings, all of that. Everybody's adversely affected. And what else suffers? What you imagine?
Academics.
Absolutely. Spot on every time, Teresa. Academics suffer. So now what we have to do is to illustrate to the administrators and the principal, if the academics is suffering, what now suffers?
Social and emotional.
Yeah, the social emotional learning piece suffers, but their data, because also part of the data that they're drawing from is the data that measures academic excellence and academic failure. So once we tie this whole picture in for them, they have an aha moment, believe it or not. Sometimes you have to kind of draw the roadmap for people to see how cause and effect, one thing has everything to do with the other. So now we've got their attention, right? Because they want us to really help change that data. And we're going to show them how. So communicating in a clear reporting mechanisms is really, really important. So through having that conversation with the administrators as well as the teachers, how important it is to not hide this information, to have a good reporting system in place is very, very, very important. Okay. That includes like what happens in incidents around the school, the types of behavior that come up with the students being bullied, physical, verbal, like tracking all of this information is really important. And how to communicate the ground rules. Okay. And are there any special need considerations? For example, if we go into a classroom and there are special need consideration, intellectual disability, physical disability, we need to be aware of that before we start the workshop, right? To make sure the school has provided accommodations. And I'll say most times they have, because these are students in their school. However, if we're asking them to assemble in another room, we want to make sure that they've taken that in consideration. Sometimes we'll go and they want to combine 2 classrooms. And one classroom may have a child that has some accommodation needs that's being moved to another space that they've never been in. So we want to make sure that's communicated on the forefront, right? So you as a facilitator, once you've done that due diligence, you'll be able to effectively do that. Just as a reminder, you don't have to move desks, you don't have to provide the special needs accommodation, but as a reminder, a gentle reminder to the school, by the way, we noticed during our orientation with your educators that there are 1 or 2 students that may need special accommodation. Just want to, make sure that that's being provided in the room in which you've decided we will assemble. Sometimes when they're combining class, they may want to meet in the library, et cetera, et cetera. So, and desks need to be moved. And typically they'll have staff to do that, but just a little reminder that they need to do that. The other thing, step 2, is to define the purpose and the goals. Okay, so that's kind of already stated in the forefront when we do all this fact finding, but you want to restate that. You want to restate the purpose and the goals that everybody understands who will be attending the workshop. With our workshops, if you're a new facilitator, typically in the first 2 to 3, you're shadowing someone else that's an experienced facilitator. We don't throw you into the lion's den. You kind of come in and you assist. You may be assisting in a number of ways. You'll also be called on to also interact with the youth, but probably the first couple of times you're in an observation mode. And you may be in the back of the classroom, you may be in the side, on the front. It depends on the framework for the classroom. And it also depends on your comfort level. Are you ready to move forward and start to engage the youth and start to help facilitate the workshop? Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Most of our workshops are recorded, so just let you know that up front. So when we're working with you, we get an authorization to release and we get approval before we go, and that's during the early survey period. The parents are all notified that there's a guest coming in, there's an educational facilitator representing 50 Shades of Purple Against Bullying, also known as FSP Against Bullying. So all of those documents are gathered and they're on file. However, even though we get approval to photograph and video, we typically set our video recorder up in the back of the classroom facing the rear of the children's heads. Some faces and side profiles make it on the video, but for the most part, we want to see the facilitator and how they're engaging with the youth and the interaction between the youth and the facilitator, not necessarily photos of kids. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions there?
No.
Okay. Okay, so you want to plan for more than just a day, like all kinds of exercises. And if you've ever been in a workshop or a conference, they'll have like icebreakers and things like that. And you want to take those in consideration. We have some suggested icebreakers and things, to kind of warm the room up, to warm the youth up as well as the educators. Now, they're ready for you when you come in, because it's like, remember your parents they were going to have company, and the first thing they say, okay, clean your room, put these away, do this, do this, do this. And you're all prepped and ready for a company to come, right? Well, it makes sense. That's the same thing that the teachers are doing with the students. They're almost overly prepared for us to come into the classroom. But again, we want to take in consideration people's different needs and allow like enough time for just every element of what we're doing. For example, if you're going to do a physical activity with the classroom, you want to take the amount of time that's going to take if you plan out a physical activity or a physical icebreaker. That's going to take a little bit of time away from your presentation. So you want to plan that out really well. And also you want to kind of have an idea what the participants should be looking forward to afterwards. Like, what are you going to do afterwards? You say, okay, bye, thanks for coming in. You want to have a kind of like a closer. And we leave this up to our facilitators so that their own personalities can come forward in any orientation that they do or any presentation. And the reason that's so important, none of this is mechanical. None of this is like so strictly scripted that you can't evolve and the children can and participants can connect with you, who you are, your personality type. If you're a person that is quick-witted, candid, and humorous, that's fantastic. Bring that into that environment because that's what's going to keep people engaged. Scripted presentations, you're going to lose everybody in a scripted presentation. So we kind of want to stay away from that. Okay, and then of course, the kind of tools that you're going to need in the presentation. The presentation is a combination of PowerPoint, and we do not have our participants looking at an overhead screen with PowerPoint. What we do is do a very, very brief overview of our web page and where to navigate the menu, and that takes like 2 minutes. And we'll allow them, and that'll go up on the screen, and it'll be in the background while you're interacting with the participants. So sometimes you may need to ask the administrator, do you have an overhead projector, or how you let them know what kind of technical needs you will need for the presentation. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Any questions?
No.
Again, if you want to kind of stay away from shuffling of a lot of paper, having your participants to write on the board, things like that. You want to keep it as green as possible. And the one thing we have found, material, documents, papers, things like that are distractions when you're talking about the young and the restless. So you want them to connect it to your voice, your body language, and the activity that you're having them to participate in.
Sounds great.
One of the things, I use this old school exercise called Whisper Down the Lane. You remember that?
I do.
Okay. And interesting enough, kids today don't know that game that well. So it becomes like a really, it was a surprise to me how many didn't know it, like the Whisper Down the Lane. And for me to start off a statement and see how far it goes down 6 or 7 kids and what it ends up at the end. And let me tell you, it's a riot. It's an absolute riot. As you can imagine, they're like, wait a minute, you messed up. You said this. And it's a beautiful icebreaker. So this is an example of one of the young and the restless. I call our young participants, our young and our restless icebreakers that go over very well. If you have an icebreaker that gets the giggles going, please feel free to do it. We'll have like 5 or 6 for you to choose from, and then you can also come up with your own. But you want to kind of limit how much time you spend on that. That's to get kids really talking and interacting with each other. Also, next, just prepare for the unexpected. And just really have a clear plan in your mind. And you want to be brutally honest with yourself, because even though the best laid out plans, if they don't go according to plan, you have to be willing and ready and able to adjust and pivot, so to speak, because if you get frustrated in front of your participants, they're going to get frustrated. So for me, I expect the unexpected when I'm before, whether it's youth or adults. Like I expect the unexpected, like, oh, okay, what's next? You know, and sometimes for me, just to smile through it, and it doesn't look like to them, I didn't expect that. They're like, I do one of those, and it's like, you knew that was going to happen. Just remember that you have, you know, your plan may not just go according to plans, and just be flexible, and it's okay. No. Okay, so during the workshop, and you know, all the preparation's over and it's time to have some fun, just remember, before you go into a workshop, the night before, don't crash study. Don't do that. Just kind of relax, get a good night's sleep, you know, because you're going to need your energy the next day to focus. So sometimes people have this style like, okay, I'm just going to cram tonight. I want to make sure I don't miss any points, cram. And you wake up the next day and you're exhausted. That'll show through in your presentation style. So you don't want to do that. Get everything in that you need to get in, you know, 2 days before, the night of. Relax, decompress, watch. I don't know if you watch movies or just listen to music, just chill out. You're going to be okay. It's not that serious. Okay? Okay, so setting the scene, I really like this. So to set up the furniture, so we have found that in communication, I'll give you an example. In my home, I have all round tables. All round tables. My 4-seaters, my 6-seaters, they're all round. There's a reason for that. If you have round seating, there's no head of the table. Everybody's equal in communication. So tried and tested, setting up your classroom circularly, whether they're sitting on the floor Indian style in a circle, whether they're sitting in their desks in a circle, is the most effective form of communication with setting the scene, because you want to remove hierarchy from your classroom. You want to remove the theory of the teacher's pet. Oh, this person gets called because they sat in a certain place. And you also want to avoid people from hiding from participation. So when they're sitting in a circle, everybody has an opportunity to engage and have eyes on them. And also you're going to avoid distractions when everyone's sitting in a circle. Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Once everybody is settled in, it's time to go around the room and complete the check-in and all of those kinds of things, and what you're bringing to the table, and you know, how you're feeling right now. And we're going to also do some training around open-ended questions so you can get the dialogue going, okay? You're going to go over the ground rules with everyone, and that's the logistics, if there's going to be breaks and things like that. So with some of the younger kids, there's no break, but in the older kids sessions, I don't want to say kids, but participant sessions, it's like 1.5 hours, you need a break in there. Okay, so you would build that in the forefront, okay? And you want to give at least like 4 ground rules. And we don't pre-write those out, the reason being because you don't know the dynamic of your class or the dynamic of your participants, right? So the ground rules could change depending on who your participants are. The ground rules for a first grader is certainly going to be different than the ground rules for a 5th grader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So once you know who your participants are, for example, your first graders, one of the ground rules is, you know, you may want to ask them, okay, you don't want to blurt out. You want to raise your hand to speak. You want to wait until someone's finished speaking before you speak. What kind of signal do you use? Maybe you want to set a rule for signals for going to the restroom for some of the younger children. Those kinds of things. The teacher and administrator can assist with that. Okay.
Mhm.
Once you get all this together, you're going to pull it all together. You want to share your agenda and set the expectations with the participant. Most of the time, you're going to be sharing that with the educators that has brought you into the classroom. You may have Ms. Jones that brought you into her third grade class, or you may have Ms. Taylor that brought you into her fourth grade class. Your agenda may be different for your third grade class than your fourth grade class. You want to share that with them and remind the participants that you, at the end of the workshop, when it's going to end. Kind of like, now this is going to be 45 minutes, so we're starting at 9 a.m. So, get a little clock watching, but at least they know, okay, this is going to be winding down. Okay, and you want to set a little timekeeper for yourself. Back in the adult presentation days, the timekeeper was someone in the back of the room holding up a 2-minute warning. Well, you can do that with your mobile phone now. You can set your little timers and use your devices to help you with that. In your particular case, if you're starting off shadowing another facilitator, you may be asked to be the timekeeper. To avoid distractions, okay? So we talked a little bit about early on about icebreakers. So you just want to make sure that it's age appropriate because we're talking 1st to 5th grade. An icebreaker that is set up for, Whisper Down the Lane can go 1st to 5th grade, honestly. But other icebreakers, you want to give some thought and consideration to the type of icebreaker that you need to introduce. And you may not need one at all. It depends on the classroom. Okay. Anything to lighten the mood. And so you'll share examples of that. So what's a facilitator? So a facilitator really is not like the control freak or the micromanager. That's not the style we're looking for. The facilitator is someone that's going to make sure that the presentation and the interaction flows smoothly. Like there's nobody hogging the floor. There's no big disruptions. There's going to be disruptions. They're young, but there's no big disruptions that's going to throw the entire presentation off. So you're there almost like a referee. It's like, you set these ground rules, just want to make sure everybody plays by the ground rule. So sometimes what you may want to do is get everybody involved. Here's an example of one of the exercises I do, and I set it up really early on up front. When someone is speaking, no matter what they say, whether you agree or not, you will affirm and confirm what they said. So if Malcolm said, well, I remember when I was out on the playground and somebody pushed me, and I just really didn't want to tell the teacher, but now that I'm hearing this, I feel like I should have said something. And the classroom's response to that is not silence, it's yes, yes. And when you hear the harmony, yes, yes, and you teach them that up front. Whenever someone finishes their statement, you're going to confirm that, and yes, yes, it's like, I heard you. Doesn't mean you agree or disagree. It means I heard you. I'm listening to you. And the sound of that is almost magical in the classroom. And when I'm with our Spanish-speaking youth, if I find that I've got a lot of Spanish-speaking children in the classroom, I'll say, sí. And that rings so much prettier than yes, yes, for some reason. So now what have I done? What have I taught my non-Spanish speaking students?
You taught them also to say yes in Spanish.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, they have so much fun with it. And remember I said, bring yourself to the table. So I do this thing called jazz hands. And so when I walk through the hall room, the kids go, jazz hands. It is so much fun. The giggles are amazing. And it's just almost, the laughter is infectious. So it's a lot of fun. So again, You're not there to control, you're there to facilitate, and you're there to also leave them with something incredibly memorable, and that's you. And then when you become memorable, what you teach them becomes memorable. So that's part of like making sure that the participants were seen and heard. You want to kind of try alternative and different kinds of methods and exercises to balance it out, and you'll get the hang of that. Two things for me that has worked really well is the jazz hands and yes, yes, and CC. That's worked really, really well. So I kind of stick with that, but I'm not opposed to incorporating other ways to make sure that my participants are seen and heard. Any questions?
Yeah.
So we want to encourage multimedia documentation. Our authorization forms are required beforehand. All of that, we've got that done and out of the way. That's all been taken care of. And you're going to kind of like go into your folder. This is your preparation before you start your session. To kind of go into your folder, your online folder, make sure everything's in there. Okay, I've got all my authorization forms in there beforehand. All my surveys have been complete. My pre-surveys have been completed. Instructions to the educators about how the classroom needs to be set up before I arrive. They know what time I'm coming. I've already told them how long their session is going to last, so forth and so on. I've already told them if there's any breaks that are going to be built in. You don't have to say, oh, I'm going to do icebreaker at this time. It doesn't have to be down to the minute, but just kind of give them some idea of what you're going to need, what support you'll need while they're in the classroom. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Questions?
No, I'm still absorbing everything.
Okay. So before you turn off the light and let everybody go home, you want to kind of like get back to your yes and no questions, you know, and some of that is like, did you or did you not achieve the goal that you set for that workshop? Kind of like go in your own head, like start thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily are you looking for them to answer that question, but you'll get a sense and a feel from the educator who's also in that room observing, you know, maybe say, how do you think it went? You know, kids are gonna not necessarily understand that question per se. However, the educator that brought you in will clearly understand that question. And you should just tell them, just be honest. I just need the honest feedback. Not that, you know, I just want to make sure if I need to adjust in any way or think about things the next time differently. Okay, kind of checking the pulse. Okay, so 13 again is just kind of checking in before you check out. So now you want to communicate the next step. And you can either say, like, this is what to expect next, or I'll follow up in writing with an email to let you know what to expect next. Most times they want to get their classrooms back together and they're not really in the mood for a long dialogue. And oftentimes you're preparing to go to the next class. So it's okay to say, hey, the next step is I'm going to send you an email to wrap up, you know, my findings, or I'm going to send you a post survey, whatever that's going to look like. You know, so after this workshop, just break your arm off and pat yourself on the back. You're like, yay, I got through that. That was the longest 45 minutes or the longest hour or the longest hour and a half in my life. And you're like, if it was rough, go out to your car and scream. Chances are, go out to your car and giggle and laugh, call your friends. You know, I don't know if you're a social media person, do whatever you need to do to decompress and clear your mind for the next classroom. Do not beat up on yourself about what happened in that particular classroom. Learn from that experience. If there's some things you need to shuffle around, shuffle them around in the next room. you will get another opportunity. So like you're going to ask for feedback. So this part here where you're asking for feedback immediately after, it depends. It's been our experience that the educators and counselors and parents, if their parents in there, they don't want to spend a lot more time with you. They've just spent 45 minutes or an hour and a half with you, which is a lot of time. It feels like dog minutes. So you want the post survey that's going to be sent to them and encourage them to complete that. And we have a way to follow up on that as well, okay? Okay, questions?
About how many kids usually are in a?
Well, most schools limit the classroom to about 35. Now, I will say when we first started this program, we did it assembly style. Big mistake, hundreds of kids in a large assembly room. Never do that again. I'm still milking and nursing the scars behind that.
Oh,
Because when
yeah.
you open up the floor for questions, you've got a few hundred people in the room. You're never going to get to the questions, and it just is very disruptive. So we usually limit a classroom to about 30, 35. Any other questions?
What are the schools? Woodbury, right now?
Yeah, well, Woodbury School District is where I'm thinking about assigning you. Just geographically, you're in that area,
Yeah.
so it makes sense. We work with the West End Elementary School. I met with the administrator, and we were thinking about going in January, but I think what we're probably going to end up going back in October with them. And they've identified third and fourth grade for us to start with. We do not go in September because September is chaotic. So what you're prepared for is October.
Okay.
So you'll be going through training through the summer and to get you prepared for October.
That's wonderful. I love everything you've said. I wish I could hear you say more about the about the facilitator role and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
As referee and everything. But yeah, continues.
All right. So some of the things that's going to be really important, the rewards that you're going to get. Okay, what's the benefit to you? Well, clearly, you're going to have the ability to communicate clearly and understand what is bullying behavior and the incident reporting process. So mind you, the incident reporting process from school to school is different. Some schools are motivated to report incidents, some are not. What we want to do is to look at what their incident reporting process is and make recommendations, not to change or redact, but make recommendations to an effective incident reporting process. Let me give you an example. I went into one school district and I said, how do you communicate the policy for bullying prevention? Oh, it's in our handbook. I said, what kind of handbook? Oh, it's in our employee handbook. That's interesting. So how do the parents know and the students know what the policy is if it's in an employee handbook? Oh, it's on our website. I said, okay. So me being somewhat of an expert at this, I go to the website, I don't see it. It's not on the menu. You literally have 4 drop downs before you could get to it. Now think about a parent trying to find the bullying prevention policy, rules, and regulations. And you have 4 different drop downs, and not to mention a student trying to find it. So what we do is make recommendations to unearth that information. So it's glaring right there. Look at my eyes. It's glaring like right there. It's as big as the homepage. How to report incidents. What's the tolerance policy? What happens? All of that needs to be right there. The other thing you'll get, you'll increase the confidence in you'll increase confidence in the school's roles and responsibilities should incidents occur. Excuse me. So we talked about schools not being motivated to report because they're not rewarded to report. They're actually almost penalized for reporting. So we want to change that. We want to encourage them to report incidents, because once we help the hierarchy understand the importance of these incidents and how it can improve their results, not deteriorate their results, then we start to shift that model of thinking. One of the questions I asked a lot of the educators, I said, do you believe your school is doing well if their incident reports increase or decrease? What do you think they say?
They say we're doing well if they decrease.
They all say that. What do you think?
When you increase the reporting, you're doing better.
Absolutely. So we have to teach them why that is. So why is it better if their incident reports increase? Do you know?
Because the issue of bullying is in the forefront.
You see my high five?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Spot on, spot on. And 9 times out of 10, the educators do not get that. It means that the students have absolutely gained confidence in the reporting process. See something, say something, something will be done. See something, and you don't say anything because you don't believe anything is going to be done. Everyone deserves to feel safe, which is our mantra. And we try to bring that to the forefront of what we're doing with this program. When students feel safe, guess what they stop doing? Most time when kids, I'll help you out with this one. Most time when kids say, I don't feel like going to school today, I'm not well, they're faking it because they're afraid. They're just afraid. They don't want to be bullied. They want to be abused. They don't want to feel nauseous. They don't want to feel sick.
Oh, yeah, that's
okay. So what happens with the parents when they have to stay home or find someone to watch their child while they're home and they have to work? It hits their bottom line too. It has an impact on their ability to work, and financially can impact them as well.
Yeah.
Questions?
What are some statistics about bullying?
I almost hate to quote them because they're skewed because the reporting process is so flawed. You know, arguably, I would say that, 70% of every single human has been affected directly or indirectly by bullying and abuse. 70%. That's what I would say, arguably. If I was to have 10 people around the table in my home, or you two, and you say, hey, you know what? I witnessed or been affected by bullying. How about you? And you go around that table, 7 out of 10 will agree. And shuffle the deck, invite another 10 in, and then another 10, and then another 10. This is why the data that is provided by the United States Department of Education and the CDC is skewed. If these numbers are not being reported, if incidents are not being reported, how could their data possibly be accurate? Make sense?
Makes sense.
So you wrapped up the classroom and everything has been done and said and done. You've done the best that you can do. They become a think tank graduate. I mean, they get a certificate of completion. We have this fantastic certificate that is sent to them. Most of the schools display it very beautifully in their assembly rooms, in their classrooms. Each classroom get one. Each of the kids get a certificate. We send it out to them virtually. They can print it at the school. If the school doesn't have the resources to print it, we can also do that for them as well. Make sense? Any questions? You have other questions?
Yeah, what helps the students take pride? I know the certificates are a really good way. And what else helps the students take pride in their learning?
Absolutely. And now, you walk away and the kids are feeling like, you know what? This was like an hour of I really kind of feel good. Like I feel better. I feel like this agency is here to help us. And I've had, an hour away from schoolwork, and we had some fun with it. But overall, not just fun and games, they're going to remember. And we don't just drop the ball there. Like I said, we do a post survey, we check in, and they remember that they can call our agency. If they can't report it at school, they can also report the incidents to us.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So that is your Think Facilitator Orientation Part 1.
All right.
How are you feeling?
Good.
Do you have any last minute questions? Any questions that I didn't have an opportunity to answer?
No.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So here's what happens next. Like I said, we always close everything with a what next. I'm going to give you an opportunity to digest what we just discussed. After we get off this call, you're going to find some questions that you didn't ask. And the document I just shared with you, I am actually going to send that to you. So you have an opportunity to have that in your archives and read that at your leisure. You'll send me an email with any questions that you have after you have an opportunity to review that. And then we'll schedule part 2.
All right.
All right.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, it's been fantastic talking to you. I've really enjoyed this. And like I said, I wanted to record this. And so I can also use the recording for future training purposes. So I'm going to stop the record now.